They say every cursed object carries a story, one that refuses to fade even with the passing of centuries. In 1971, Kyoto, Japan, a young man named Hiro Nakamoto found a mysterious Japanese Akuma Doll, a relic so sinister that it shattered the thin veil between curiosity and horror. What Hiro didn't know was that his discovery would unearth secrets his family had buried for decades. And once the curse awoke, there would be no going back. It was a rainy afternoon in Kyoto, the kind where the streets seemed to drown under the endless cascade of water. Hiro Nakamoto, a 23-year-old university student, had returned to his ancestral home to help his grandfather clear out the attic. The old man had grown frail, his once strong voice now a soft rasp. "Throw out whatever's useless," his grandfather muttered, his words heavy with exhaustion. "But if you find something old, something strange, bring it to me." The attic was a world forgotten by time. Dust coated every surface, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. Hiro found himself surrounded by faded photographs, broken tools, and wooden crates that looked as though they hadn't been touched in decades. His flashlight beam flickered as it swept across the space, landing on an ornate chest tucked in the far corner. The chest was no ordinary box. Its surface was carved with elaborate patterns, oni masks, serpents, and kanji that Hiro couldn't decipher. The wood was dark, almost black, and its metal lock was tarnished with rust. Yet despite its age, the chest felt alive. Something about it made Hiro's skin prickle. Why would anyone hide this? He muttered to himself as he pulled it into the light. Finding a small key tied to the chest's handle, Hiro hesitated for a moment before unlocking it. The lid creaked open with an agonizing slowness, revealing a bundle of faded silk. Gently, he unwrapped it to find what lay beneath, a porcelain doll. The doll was unlike anything Hiro had ever seen. Its face was eerily lifelike, yet cracked, as though time itself had tried to destroy it. The eyes, deep and black, seemed to glimmer faintly even in the dim light. Its mouth was a thin, haunting line, and its hair, a jet-black cascade, looked as though it had been pulled from a real person. Hiro shivered, an involuntary reaction he couldn't explain. He could feel something in the room shift, like the air had grown heavier. Despite the unease creeping up his spine, he couldn't look away. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Beware of cursed things, Hiro. Our family has a past we don't speak of, a past tied to demons and darkness." Brushing off the growing sense of dread, Hiro brought the doll downstairs. When his grandfather saw it, he froze, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. The old man's hands trembled as he backed away, muttering in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "Why did you open it? That chest, it was sealed for a reason." Confused, Hiro asked, "It's just a doll. What's the big deal?" His grandfather grabbed his arm with surprising strength, his voice now sharp and urgent. "That is no ordinary doll. It's the Akuma Doll. My father, your great-grandfather, sealed it away long ago. That thing is cursed, Hiro. It doesn't just watch, it remembers." Hiro laughed nervously, dismissing the warning as the ramblings of an old man. But that night, as the rain pounded against the windows, Hiro woke to a sound he couldn't place, a faint tapping noise. He turned on the bedside lamp and scanned the room, his heart racing. Everything seemed normal until his eyes landed on his desk. The doll, which he had left in the living room, now sat upright on the desk, its empty black eyes fixed directly on him. Hiro's breath caught in his throat. The doll hadn't just moved, it had turned its head slightly, as though acknowledging him. And that was when the whispers began. The night after discovering the doll was the beginning of Hiro Nakamoto's descent into terror. The whispers had started faintly, almost imperceptible, like a breeze brushing against his ear. But as the hours dragged on, they grew louder, forming words in a language Hiro didn't understand. He lay frozen in his bed, his eyes locked on the doll sitting motionless on his desk. He told himself it wasn't real, that the rain, the exhaustion, and his grandfather's ominous words were playing tricks on him. But deep inside, Hiro knew something was wrong. By dawn, Hiro's nerves were frayed. He packed the doll into an old blanket and shoved it into the closet, determined to forget it existed. The day passed uneventfully, but a gnawing unease lingered. When the evening came, Hiro decided to confront his grandfather again. As he entered the living room, he found the old man staring into the flickering flames of the hearth, his face etched with worry. Hiro hesitated before speaking. "Tell me the truth about that doll. What is it? Really?" His grandfather sighed deeply, his frail shoulders slumping as though a heavy weight rested upon them. "The Akuma Doll is no toy," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a vessel, a trap for something far worse. It belonged to an Onmyoji, an ancient sorcerer who bound a demon into it centuries ago. That demon, it thrives on fear and guilt. It latches onto its victims, feeding off their pain, until what?" Hiro pressed, his stomach twisting. The old man hesitated, his eyes glistening with something Hiro had never seen before, pure fear. "Until there's nothing left of them but their screams." Hiro's laugh was hollow. "You're kidding, right? This is just an old story, a scare tactic." His grandfather's trembling hand grabbed Hiro's wrist. "Then tell me, boy, why do you think it's still here? Why hasn't it been destroyed? You think I haven't tried? The Akuma cannot be rid of so easily. It's tied to our bloodline. And now, because you touched it, because you brought it into this house, it's awake." Hiro shook off his grandfather's hand and stormed out. It was absurd. This was the 20th century, not some feudal-era superstition. But the moment he re-entered his bedroom, he froze. The closet door was open. Hiro's heart thundered as he stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. Inside, the blanket was neatly folded, and the doll sat upright on the shelf, its head tilted slightly to one side, as though mocking him. That night, the dreams began. Hiro found himself standing in a dense forest. The air was heavy with mist, and the faint sound of a flute echoed in the distance. Ahead of him stood a woman in a red kimono. Her back was turned, but her presence radiated malice. In her hands, she held the doll, cradling it like a child. "Hiro," she whispered, her voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Slowly, the woman turned, her face hidden behind a curtain of wild black hair. But it wasn't her eyes that terrified him. It was her smile. A wide, unnatural grin stretched across her pale face, her teeth sharp like a predator's. Hiro jolted awake, drenched in sweat, his chest heaving. But the nightmare didn't end. Across the room, the doll sat in the chair by the window, bathed in moonlight. It wasn't where he had left it before falling asleep. And this time, it was smiling. The next morning, Hiro found scratches on his bedroom walls, long, jagged marks, as though claws had raked across the plaster. His grandfather avoided him, muttering prayers under his breath whenever Hiro walked by. But it wasn't until Hiro woke to find a single strand of long black hair on his pillow that he finally understood. The doll wasn't just cursed. It was alive. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were demands, and the dreams no longer felt like dreams. The woman in the red kimono wanted something, and she wasn't going to stop until Hiro gave it to her. But what did she want? Hiro Nakamoto was no longer himself. The whispers had become screams. The dreams had transformed into waking horrors, and his home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison of dread. For days, the doll continued to haunt him. No matter where he hid it or how far he threw it, it always returned, sitting on his desk, staring at him with those hollow, unblinking black eyes. The woman in the red kimono had begun appearing even when Hiro was awake. Her presence lingered in the corners of rooms, her figure reflected in mirrors, her shadow stretching across walls where no one stood. She never spoke, but her intentions were clear. She wanted Hiro to return the doll. One evening, as the sky turned blood red with the setting sun, Hiro's grandfather sat him down. The old man's face was pale, his hands trembling as he held a small, worn notebook. "This is the journal of my father," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It contains a ritual, the only way to send the Akuma back to where it came from." Hiro flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the faded ink and ancient kanji. The instructions were cryptic but clear enough. The doll needed to be returned to the forest shrine where it was first bound, and the ritual had to be performed under the light of a crescent moon. "But beware," his grandfather warned. "The demon will fight you. It will try to break your resolve, to feed on your fear. If you fail." He trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. That night, armed with a lantern, a blade, and the notebook, Hiro ventured into the forest. The path was overgrown, the trees looming like skeletal sentinels. The air was thick and oppressive, each breath feeling like it carried the weight of centuries. As Hiro approached the shrine, the doll in his backpack began to grow heavier, almost unbearably so. Whispers filled the air, growing louder with every step, until they became a cacophony of voices, pleading, mocking, screaming. Hiro, the woman's voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear. He turned to see her standing in the distance, her kimono tattered and bloodstained, her face a mask of rage. She didn't walk, she glided, her movements unnatural and jerky, like a puppet on invisible strings. Hiro's heart pounded as he reached the shrine, a crumbling structure surrounded by jagged rocks and gnarled trees. Placing the doll on the altar, he began to chant the words from the notebook. His voice wavered, but he forced himself to continue, even as the ground beneath him began to tremble. The woman screamed, a sound so inhuman it felt like it would split his skull. Shadows erupted from her form, twisting and writhing like living things. They surged toward Hiro, their cold, claw-like tendrils wrapping around his legs and arms, pulling him away from the shrine. "Finish it!" His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Hiro returned home, his steps heavy but his heart lighter. The weight that had pressed on the house for weeks was gone, replaced by a strange calm. His grandfather greeted him at the door, his frail body leaning heavily on his cane, but his face lit up with a smile Hiro hadn't seen in months. "You did it," his grandfather said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. Hiro nodded, too drained to speak, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at his lips. He had faced the unthinkable and survived. It was finally over. At least, that's what he wanted to believe. As he entered his room, exhaustion overcame him. He dropped his bag by the door and turned toward his desk. But the moment his eyes landed on it, his heart stopped. There, in the dim light of his room, sat the doll. Its porcelain face was pristine once again, as though it had never cracked. Those unblinking black eyes bore into him, colder and more malevolent than before. But what truly sent a chill down his spine was its mouth, a wide, sinister grin that stretched impossibly far, as if mocking his every effort. Hiro stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. He could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on him, suffocating the sense of victory he had felt just moments ago. And then, faintly, he heard a whisper, soft and almost playful. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You think it's over? We're just getting started." The screen fades to black, the eerie whisper lingering. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more thrilling tales like this, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more to come, and you won't want to miss what happens next. See you in the next video.